So a brief introduction about Hani. Hani is one of the most respected journalists in Egypt. His career has been spanning over decades, starting off as a Marxist activist student in an underground movement, which was then landed you in some trouble, which was the first sign of his future career and life. It seems like your biggest friend is trouble, and you get on really well with it. He was the founding editor of Al-Ahram Weekly Online, which is the gateway for many non-Arab speaking readers, public, into Egyptian politics and the Arab world, and you were one of the voices when the Arab Spring was happening, a positive voice, but also from your critical standpoint and taking your own critical positions with regards to that, what was happening in front of you. Hani is also the author of Egypt, the Arabs and the World, which is for sale here as well, and you could get Hani to sign it after our interview, in which he also documented the Arab Spring as it was happening, and again his analysis as it was being published back then in Al-Ahram. But last year, Hani was dismissed from Al-Ahram, as he was also dismissed before under Mubarak's regime, when he was taking a very critical view of the politics and the way politics were being made in Egypt years before the revolution. Then under the presidency of Morsi and the reign of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hani found himself again kicked out of Al-Ahram for saying it like it is. And when I first met Hani, which was around 6 months after Morsi came to power, he had given a very clear, prophetic statement to the Muslim Brotherhood, where you had said, you will either get out of power democratically, you will lose power democratically, I'm paraphrasing, you said it much nicer, and one day you might win the elections again, but you will go to lose it, or you will be thrown out forever. And 6 months later, Hani was kicked out of Al-Ahram, but Morsi was kicked out of the presidential palace. Please give an applause to Hani Shaklada. Hani, before we get into your later life, which keeps getting interesting and more interesting as you go, when was the first time, if you can recall it, when you found yourself having to take a stand which wouldn't make you many friends, but you took it nonetheless?
Well, it's a very long and tedious story, actually, so please don't let me, reminisce it. But I belong to a generation, actually, which came to political awareness in the late 60s. And there, two things were happening at the same time, major. One was what was happening globally, 60s, New Left, student and youth rebellion, and so on. Black Power movement, Black Panthers, etc. Anti-war Vietnam going on. Che Guevara had been killed in 68. At the same time, in the Arab world, there was June 67 defeat that Israel had. And I was born 1950, so I grew up with Nasser. And Nasser was, to us, and definitely to myself and many of my generation, was the realization of an Arab dream. And the shock of June 67 was massive. You can just imagine. So pushed many of us into a re-evaluation of the whole Nasserist experience. And this happened across the Arab world. It happened with the Palestinians, the Arab nationalist movement swung to the left, and George Habash and the whole. And of course you had the emergence of Palestinian resistance, which inspired us a lot in Egypt as well. So we began to become active, and many of us were pushed towards the left. And that's how it started.
And then eventually from a period of activism, you ended up in journalism, and that's where you started having your direct contact with the public, if you like.
Well, the activism involved, actually, that's my first training in journalism was through being, is the microphone too close to my mouth? I think it's all right. It's okay? I was never, unlike my son and young people of today, I was never one of the stone throwing. My arms are not very strong. So I was always writing pamphlets and leaflets and wall newspapers. And that was the kind of division of labor where I fit. So the initial training actually became there. And then I went into journalism later.
And throughout your writing and militancy, you've had peaks and moments of optimism, but you could never see the Arab Spring happening as it happened in 2011.
Look, by then, I mean, there were, actually, if you look at my writing, and some people quoted me at me later, after the revolution, as predicting it, which was really untrue. Because by the time we hit January 2011, I did not see it. And actually in that book, this is the first word I said. I did not see it coming. January 1st, let me tell you, 31st of December, 2010, 1st of January 2011, myself, my wife, and some friends were at the beach, bringing in the new year. And then I get a call at around 12:30, 1 a.m., telling me about the bombing of the church of the Two Saints Church in Alexandria, in which over 100 people, children, who were actually praying the New Year in, were killed. And I spent the night with my colleagues in Cairo, covering the event and writing an article, an editorial on that event. And on that morning, I published that editorial, which was titled J'accuse, of course, borrowing the title from a very famous track. And basically, if you read that piece, I'm attacking everyone. I'm attacking the government, I'm attacking the Islamists, I'm attacking the people, the public generally, for the kind of bigotry and hypocrisy that had permeated our life. So no, I did not see the revolution coming. There was resistance always, and always there was resistance. But we had reached the stage where it was really, I had called it the Arabs' age of ugly choices. The choices were all horrible. It was Bush or Saddam. It was Bin Laden or I don't know what. And throughout the Arab world, countries of the Arab world. It was police states or Islamic states. And both authoritarian, both horrible, both sordid, and these seem to be the only choices on offer.
And that is the card that these dictators were playing at the time of the upheavals.
Which everybody was
Gaddafi,
playing,
Mubarak,
which they stand for
and now even Bashar al-Assad keeps saying it's either me or the terrorists, Islamists, which is, yeah, we'll get to that later. So then you had the 11 days of the impossible happening on the streets. Nobody could see it, it suddenly happened. Mubarak overthrown, the revolution started happening. Fast forward a year later, the very party and president that was elected into power democratically gets kicked out by the Egyptian army itself. And once again, you are now divided. You have a country divided between those who are against now the Muslim Brothers, and therefore, by default, one of those ugly choices, you are with the army, with the military, trying to get some stability and preserve democracy, which is bizarre for the army to preserve democracy. And on the other hand, if you're with the Muslim Brothers, you're driven underground, you're terrorists. Is this what the thousands of people who died in Tahrir Square, is this what they wanted?
No, obviously not. But let me first correct you, if I may, or at least give you my own perspective, which is that Morsi was not pushed up by the army. Morsi was overthrown by the people. And we can elaborate on this later. But what happened, and I think that it's been very difficult to get this, the actual depth of what happened in Tunisia first, and then Egypt, and across the Arab world, to get that point across. At least outside the Arab world, not outside Egypt. A whole paradigm collapsed, historically collapsed. This paradigm, which had lasted for over 30 years, and which had become conventional wisdom of everybody. Everybody was convinced. And if you look at the literature, you know, a huge number of PhDs were made during that 30 years on the Islamic identity of the people, Islam and women Islam. I don't know what Islam and children Islam, and you know, Islam became, you know, I once, you know, made this slogan: study Islam and see the world. You know, if you wanted to study Islam, there were scholarships on offer. And the whole point was Arabs and Muslims, but specifically Arabs, are outside world history, are something unique, exceptional, strange, bizarre, and the whole world is moving towards greater freedom, towards greater democracy. But Arabs are different because they're Muslims. And they're defined by their so-called Muslim identity, which is a huge fallacy. And the alternatives on offer are either police states ruling these governments and keeping the Islamists, ruling these fundamentally Muslim people and keeping the Islamists away, and the West supported them for many, many years on that particular basis, or it's Islamic government. And I could see it from the first day of the revolution. No one expected a revolution like the one we saw. You know, everybody was talking, if they spoke of, you know, an impending or a possible disturbances or uprisings, it was either an Islamic revolution or at best bread riots, you know, the kind of hunger, undisciplined uprising which would set things on fire, and the Islamists again would come on top of it. But then you had the 18 days where not a single Islamist slogan was raised, where the slogans were freedom. If you had seen these young people chanting Hurriya, 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 which is freedom, 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 and the kind of passion and you know, intensity that went into this chant. And we're speaking about hundreds of thousands of young people we're speaking. And immediately I knew this is a collapse of both. This is a historic collapse of both. And that's why the irony, the great paradox of the Egyptian revolution, and not just the Egyptian revolution, but the Arab Spring as a whole, is that you've shattered the paradigm, you've shattered the two forces that were presenting themselves as the only thing on offer. You either choose this side or that. Mahmoud Abbas or Hamas. You know, and it keeps repeating itself everywhere. And they're all awful. And this collapsed. Historically, it collapsed. They had no base. Neither this side or the other had a base. The thing is, you had a revolution that rebelled against this paradigm, that collapsed it or shattered it at least, but was unable to fill the vacuum.
Right.
So the vacuum.
So the revolutionaries were secular, anti both the Islamist front and the dictatorial regime that they were inheriting. But how ironic is it that in less than a year,
that's the thing.
government installed is the Muslim Brotherhood. So
that's the thing. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. It's, they were not. I wouldn't describe the revolution as secular, except in the very general sense of the word, but not secularist. I mean, people were praying, conducting Friday prayers, but you had Muslims conducting Friday prayers and human shields of cops around them. We've never seen these things. We've never seen people hoisting a copy of the Quran and a copy of the Bible, and the same person hoisting both, or a cross and a Quran. This is unprecedented, and we're speaking about a phenomenon that involved several million young people across the country, across the urban Egypt, which will come to this, because this was a very urban revolution. So, but they did not have, this revolution came after 30 years of destruction of politics. It was not, Mubarak was not just an authoritarian regime. The 30 years of Mubarak, we saw the gradual eradication of political space in the country. So they had these young revolutionaries, and they are, I mean, I bow to them. You know, the courage of these young people is just unbelievable. Their creativity, their sense of freedom is just, you know, it bowls you over. You cannot.
Even for someone like you who has been struggling for this to happen.
Yeah, but they're so different than us. They're so different than my generation.
In what way? What?
Look, I'll give you one very minor example. It's meaningless in itself, but just symbolic. My generation, when we were attacked by the police would run, would charge, and we would run. You know, this is natural human reaction. They charge, we run. These kids, police charge, they charge. And the police charge with bullets. At least with us, they were charging with batons. During these past 3 years, and I saw it with my own eyes in Mohammed Mahmoud. It's this narrow street leading up to from Tahrir to the Interior Ministry. And on the corner of the street, there is a field hospital. And the kids are standing, and the police start shooting, and the kids are charging the police, charging with stones and Molotov cocktails and so on. And then you've got these motorcycle ambulances. So you have these young people driving their motorcycles, very high speed, under fire, and picking up the injured and bringing them to the field hospital, which actually was shot later. So anyway, but that's we've strayed.
So it's a new form of bravery that they found in the street.
Yeah, I'm using it just as a symbol. No, but the creativity. If you look at the organization of the 18 days, it's really there was enormous organizational creativity in this, and wit, and irreverence. If you look at the graffiti, if you look at the signs, that people were just spontaneously, young people were making these signs, you know, and you had enormous humor coming in out of it, and you know, so you get a guy raising his own personally designed sign, which says, "Erhal, leave to Mubarak. My arms are
Tired.
or are tired." Or "Erhal, I miss my wife." You know,
Yeah, I had seen that in that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been way too long, I need to go back to my wife. Right?
Because they were living on the street. I mean, I have pictures of my own son with this huge pot where they were making lentil soup to distribute to the. So anyway. But that was not. I mean, these are just. You know, but they had no organizational experience, no political experience. They did not have the organization. They had these issue-based organizations which collected or collated in the Coalition of Youth, of Revolutionary Youth. And they were marvelous, very sophisticated, but they did not have the vision. They did not have a vision of power. Revolution is about power, ultimately. It's not they are great protesters, but extremely poor wielders of power. And so what the Egyptian revolution has been doing in wave after wave after wave is create power vacuums that other forces would try to fill.
So, inevitably, the Muslim Brothers, who were underground for decades under Mubarak, were the most organizationally prepared to take over the power post-revolution, even if they had declared that they weren't interested in being in government or in holding the presidency, but eventually they did take that. But, so, what happened to that energy that created those 18 days of unimaginable history in front of us? Where did that energy dissipate? What happened to it?
First of all, we have to recognize the following. Again, once you made it impossible for Mubarak to stay in the forces, again, because of, you know, people keep speaking about 30 June or 3 July as a coup. It was a coup in 11 February as well. It was the army that removed Mubarak because the people on the street made it impossible for Mubarak to rule. But they did not have the organs that would come, or even the vision or the program that would say, okay, we have elected, and this was my suggestion, by the way, but it was unworkable. Choose, I called upon the revolutionary, specifically the Coalition of Youth, the Revolutionary Youth Movement, nominate a government, nominate an interim government. And by the way, it's absurd. Revolutions you don't depose a regime and then go to the polls in accordance with the laws and institutions of that regime. You change things first, and then you go to the polls. I don't know if any revolution that immediately goes to the polls with the army of the old regime. So they did not have this. And actually, they couldn't have had it. After 30 years of eradication of politics, they just did not have the experience. So again, as I was saying, you kept creating, but let's go back to the Muslim Brotherhood, straight again. This was a deal that was struck before the overthrow of Mubarak. And it was struck with American sponsorship. Mr. Frank Wisner came in, and the Americans were intervening very strongly, talking to the military, talking to Mubarak, talking to everybody, talking to our Gulfi friends, and talking to the Muslim Brotherhood. And the regime was talking to Muslim Brotherhood. Omar Suleiman, the head of intelligence, you know it very well because he was very involved in Gaza. He met with the Muslim Brotherhood, and we know of a meeting that happened on the 2nd of February, in which the Muslim Brotherhood agreed, and we know this from Muslim Brotherhood gathers, we don't know it, you know, it's not speculation. Muslim Brotherhood leadership agreed to withdraw from the protests and to try to pull the protest back, agreed to the formula actually that Mubarak would spend the rest of his term, but go, you know, to his Sharm el-Sheikh villa, and that Omar Suleiman would be the effective, the de facto ruler of the country. And the deal was power sharing. And everything, every single step that was taken by the military council after 11 February was to implement this deal. What happened is that the people resisted. And
so the deal, just to give you an idea, includes the survival of the military as it was, with all the powers that it had already had.
It was a typical power sharing deal, and it's the kind of deal that the Americans would love. You know, because they've seen it in Pakistan, and they've seen it in Turkey, and so on. Military and Islamists, and nice Islamists, and by the way,
English speaking, yeah. English speaking, not Islamists.
Nice Islamists, yeah. In specifically, the quality of niceness is your position Israel, and they were making very solid, you know, commitments. We will not touch Camp David. We will not touch the peace treaty. We will rein in Hamas, by the way, and these were almost public statements. Sometimes the rhetoric will take them, and they, you know, and they always speak from both sides of their mouth. So, and one time, somebody in the American embassy tweeted, you know, we can speak Arabic too, or we can read Arabic too.
In English, they would say one thing, and then in Arabic, they would pander to the crowd.
Very Arafat style.
Yeah.
So anyway, the deal was the old state, represented by the military and the deep state, by the intelligence body and the military, would be the senior partner, and this would be expressed through the privilege, maintaining their privileged position, indeed expanding it, giving them certain veto rights, and the presidency. That the president, thank you, that the president would be a military, not necessarily a military man, but a candidate nominated by the military. And the Muslim Brotherhood were making statements and swearing themselves blue in the face. We will not nominate anyone for the presidency. And they actually expelled Abd Minam Abu Futuh because he decided to run for the presidency. Oh, thank you. It's a bit hot, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. you would take a chunk of parliament through which they form the bulk of the government, along with technocrats and so on. That was the main outline of the deal. And if you look at the amazing thing, the first thing the military did was to issue this constitutional declaration, which they put to a vote, to a referendum. And this was designed specifically to implement this deal. And the 5-man committee that they made to make this declaration was mostly Islamists and headed by someone very close to the Muslim Brotherhood, Judge Tariq al-Bashir. And if you look at the voting, when that constitutional declaration was put to a referendum, the Islamist propaganda was in the street, and this was public. This is a vote for Islam. And if you vote no to the constitutional declaration, you are anti-Islam. You are voting for the Copts, you are voting for the Christians. It was that blatantly sectarian. And that was the deal. What happened, in fact, was that we the people, basically then, we ruined the deal. Because then people were out on the street almost 10 days after 10 or 15 days after the overthrow of Mubarak, they were back in Tahrir. And we had our first clash with the military. And it kept going on and on. And I have never seen the Egyptian military as humiliated and as battered and as beaten as during that year. And we're speaking here about demonstrations that once again involved hundreds of thousands and in direct conflict with the military rule. Because, after 30 June, Western journalists started doing, the usual bit of summing up Egyptians and what Egyptians are about. So we had so many pieces written saying, well, Egyptians are brought up to adore the army. For God's sake, we brought the army down. and this is another myth here, is that the overthrow of the military council, Tantawi's military council, was by Morsi. This is rubbish. Whoever says this knows nothing about how the Egyptian state functions. Morsi, the military council was overthrown by the military, was overthrown by Sisi, and under pressure from the people.
So let's fast forward now. We have a presidential candidate who is the former general until a couple of weeks ago of the army, and so we are now again. And you had actually said that almost sympathetically that the army had to intervene to remove the Muslim Brothers because that's what the people wanted. But isn't giving that kind of power to the army and now seeing almost the inevitable that the general is running for elections and it brings back all the echoes of Mubarak coming back into power. Don't you see the contradiction, at least as narrated even by Western journalists, of people who went to the elections, to the ballot box, with all the problems that there were, and then calling on the army to remove that party from power?
We didn't call on the army to remove that party from power. We were, like we didn't call on the army to remove Mubarak from power, or we didn't call on Sisi to remove Tantawi from power. We fought against them all, and we fought to depose them. But in fact, and I never said it sympathetically, by the way, because I have no sympathy for the military. This is, I think, practical revolutionary politics. In Egypt, in the kind of situation in Egypt, your choices were either to force the army to do your bidding, or to go into direct confrontation with the army. Direct confrontation with the army means arms, means Syria and Libya. Libya didn't have an army, so And NATO did the job for them, with a few bombing things and so on. And now we have the mess that is Libya. But Syria, this was not a choice. This is not a choice that I would advocate. I don't think it's impossible. It's possible in any case because of the geopolitics of Egypt. But if you actually, and this is what makes me actually furious with Western journalists who come, off the plane and tell us what we're supposed to do and shouldn't do. Is if you count the number of Syrian dead since the beginning of the Syrian revolution as percentage of the population and applied to Egypt, you're speaking about 3 million Egyptians dead already, let alone millions more displaced and injured. So, no, this is not a scenario. But the point is, if you have the will, the organization, and I think there were many very specific instances where you could have, obviously a compromise would have been necessary. But the thing is, you were not a party to, you were on the street, you were making everything, you were a spoiler. You were spoiling other deals, but you were not there saying, I've got a million people on the street, and you give me this, and that, and then we can talk. But you weren't. You were not a party to the talks. Everything was being done behind your back. And this was done in every single stage of the Egyptian revolution. And it's being done now. It was done since 3 July. I mean, they, for instance, after 30 June, they gave some concessions in order to battle the Muslim Brotherhood. So you had the Miblawi government with several members, including the Prime Minister, being drawn from the Social Democratic Party, which was a party that played a role, or at least was a product of the revolution and played a role in it. It's gathering. And as I was telling, I think, someone before, we had the labor minister who came from the independent trade union movement, and so on. But then, you couldn't do these things. You were so weak, and you did not have the political will or ability to impose this political will, and they grabbed it. And again, it's hijacked. Again, 11 February was hijacked. The overthrow of the military council was hijacked. The overthrow of the Muslim Brotherhood was hijacked. And now we have counter-revolution. And we've had counter-revolution from the first day. I wrote this at the beginning of an article, and I posted it before that. I said, revolution and counter-revolution are twin-born. Once you have a revolution, you have counter-revolution. It's inevitable. And you have to know how to deal with it. And yes, what we have now is frenzied attempt at counter-revolution. Frenzied attempt, especially by the police body.
So what we have now is actually the Muslim Brotherhood thrown underground again, declared terrorist. We've had some 500 activists given the death sentence.
And yesterday also another 600, so now we've got a total of 1,000 something.
Yeah, 1,100.
Yeah.
And journalists are being also persecuted, being imprisoned.
They've banned 6 April.
Even if, yes, and if someone interviews a Muslim Brotherhood spokesman, he's immediately labeled a terrorist. So we're back to the police state, we're back to a state of frenzy, as you called it. Where is this leading to?
We are witnessing a concerted attempt to restore the police state. Okay, I wouldn't say we are as yet, because when we say we're back to the police state, it means the revolution has been defeated. It may be. I'm not, I'm not denying that this is, or not arguing that this is impossible. It may be defeated ultimately. And actually, if you look at the history of revolutions, revolutions are much more often defeated than winning. And again, the French Revolution is at least my inspiration all the time. But I think it's difficult. I think it's very difficult. First of all, for many reasons. Let me just try to cover them. I don't want to bore you too much with very domestic Egyptian issue. But first of all, you have a deeply divided state. Deeply divided state. The judiciary is acting on its own. They've gone mad. You know, they've had this vendetta with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they've got totally nuts.
So they're not responding to orders from the military.
It's not happening this way. It's not, you know, again, you know, really. You know, it's this age of soundbites. You know, it's CNN and
And you're part of it. You're a journalist. So you know.
Yes, but you know, look, if you, Carl, go to cover something in Britain, would you start your story by saying, well, Brits are well known to, you know, love the Queen, or whatever. You know, they're brought up to adore the Queen, or something of the sort. Would you make sweeping statements about Americans or Europeans? Or, you wouldn't. But, you know, the most liberal Western journalists will come to Egypt and have no compunction about summarizing the Egyptian people, you know, in 2 or 3 sentences, and usually stupid sentences, which have no meaning. You know, like Egypt is a gift of the Nile, which is very nice. Which again is pure nonsense. It's meaningless, and it's repeated so often. Yeah. Where were we?
So, well, my
what I'm
question
saying is, there is an effort. So first of all, we have a deeply divided state.
Yes.
It's not.
So you are saying that the military, the media,
there is
judiciary,
inter-agency and intra-agency conflicts all the time. I mean, right now, if you look at what's happening, if you look at some of the Egyptian media, there is a battle over ownership of Sisi. The oligarchs, the Mubarak oligarchs, and the Interior Ministry want to pull him towards a complete restoration of Mubarakism, a police state. And then he's got his left wing, which is people like Hakel, some group of Nasserists and so on, who went over to Sisi. Again, misguidedly, but they're pulling him in a different direction. It's a real conflict. It's a real conflict. Give you an example. Very good friend of mine was Ziad Bahaeddin, who was deputy prime minister in the government, the interim government, came immediately after 32. He's a social democrat, and he's a very, very good person. I'm far to his left, of course. And on one occasion, there were these 2 Canadian journalists that were arrested in front of Ramses Square, in front of a mosque or something. And the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and Sisi himself asked that they be released, just so as not to create an international scandal. And they were slapped immediately. The second day, and they told me the story, you know, he said, you know, he was told they're going to be out in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, in an hour, and so on. And then they're kept to the second day. And the second day, a judge gives them 15 days in prison. They were released ultimately. But that was the kind of, you have a deeply divided state. You have thousands, tens of thousands of young people who led this revolution, who paid the price, who have seen their comrades and friends killed in front of them, beside them, right? I was telling you earlier, my son has been to the morgue more than he's been to museums or, you know, carrying his comrades to. These kids will not give up. They will not give up. And you have very contradictory phenomena. You have also a labor movement that has witnessed, we have not, since 30 June, you'd expect in this whole reign of terror, and there is a reign of terror, they're trying to institute a reign of terror, that everybody would be scared and silent and so on. The labor movement, we have not had a day without strikes. Not a single day in the last, since 30 June until today. So, no, it's not easy. It's not easy.
And in the meantime, you were telling me, your observation is that the way the media are behaving right now reminds you of post-September 11 in America, where the war on terror, everyone towing the line, and so where will you find your place now as a journalist?
Always through the cracks. I was telling you this earlier. I once made a joke in a media conference. I said, you know, freedom of the media in the Arab world exists by function of the competition between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. If they kiss and make up, there is no media freedom in the Arab world. That's the end of it. Well, but that's a bit of a joke, basically. But really, we always work. We get, obviously, we have the alternative media, which has been very important. Web-based media, and of course, the young people have, you know, their graffiti and their theater. And under the military, they made, for instance, a campaign, an amazing campaign. I don't know if it was reported, but it was called Military Alliance Campaign. And this was spontaneously developed, just like the Tamaruk movement, you know, just joined by hundreds of young people. And they would organize these activities on campuses, on the street, in different quarters, in different villages, in towns, and so on. You know, wherever they have a contact, they go and they hold these activities. And they would include leaflets and pamphlets, the usual, the traditional tools, but graffiti, theater, song, film footage, proving that the military were liars, you know? And thousands of these activities took place. We had graffiti showing Tantawi with a big Pinocchio nose all over the country. Everywhere you go, you know, you would find Tantawi with his long Pinocchio nose. So, yeah, so there is an alternative media. Again, the paradoxes of this very fluid situation is that, for instance, I'm publishing now, and I'm writing right now. I'm writing a series in which I'm saying that the strategy against the Brotherhood is a strategy of liquidation, and it's a strategy that is actually using the Brotherhood as a pretext to reinstitute the police state. And I'm saying it through Aram. You know, how long will I be able to, God knows?
Because, yeah, since Hani arrived in Malta, he has been writing back on Al-Ahram. We don't know for how long, but you're saying what you have to say. But I'm conscious of the time.
Yeah.
And I would like to see if there are any questions from the public, anyone who would like to ask any question to Hani before we wrap up.
I'd like to start with a comment, okay? When a French politician visited China in the 1970s under Mao, he asked Mao, or some people say it could be Zhou Enlai, but it was Mao, what he thought of the French Revolution. And he said it's too early to say.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I'm a bit of skeptic about this, about the Arab Spring. And I'm going to go on your last point only, what you just said now that you're writing again, there's the media portraying various figures like Tantawi, etc., etc. Just look at the West as a completely different paradigm where there's meant to be democracy, freedom of speech, etc. What did the media do to stop people like Tony Blair and Bush? Absolutely nothing. So the reverse comes back to Egypt, and just Egypt is just one, the most important actually Arab state, but there is a configuration of other Arab states as well, which are taking part. I agree with you that the paradigm has finished, the paradigm of having a ruler, etc. And some years before the Arab Spring, there was a meeting in Dubai where Al Maktoum, it was still Mohammed Al Maktoum, Grand Dubai, told the delegates, if things are to remain the same, things have to change, at least cosmetically. He warned about this Arab Spring being building up, etc. Especially when you look at, for example, different examples like Libya and Syria, yes, who people were expecting the United States after 9/11 to take action against them, and they didn't. They realized they didn't be saved by anyone except themselves. And what happened in the Arab Spring happened. Some dominoes were taken out to save the others from falling. My point is just this, that the media, no matter what we talk about social media, etc., in the eventual days, the conflicts they create are encapsulated, they are limited, there's nothing they can do, they're impotent.
Oh, I fully agree. And the fact that I'm writing is not at all an indication of anything. It's just, no, I have no, on the contrary, we have, since 30 June, we've witnessed the worst ever period in the history of the Egyptian media. It's rubbish. It's a caricature of the American media after 9/11. Hysteria, frenzy, lies, just across the board. The fact that you can, inject a little, voice here and there, that's meaningless. It gets flooded, but I don't think ultimately the media is that important, as you said. People. It's what happens. It's what happens in the daily practice of people, which creates its own kind of modes of information so yeah, it really is. I'm not. But as for the example of the French Revolution. Because I keep repeating this example to the young people, because they obviously and very naturally get despondent, that the enormity of the dream and the greatness of what they achieve, and it keeps getting beaten down, and of course I tell them, well, look at the French Revolution. It was hijacked. And it was defeated, and you had restoration, and then you had two Bonapartisms, and what we're having in Egypt now actually is almost textbook Bonapartism. It's textbook. I don't think it will work, but it is, but it changed the world. The point is, a revolution may be defeated, a great revolution may be defeated, but still. Its message will triumph ultimately. I don't think anybody can deny this. And I think we've passed this. We've done this in Egypt and in the Arab world. Something new, a new stage in our history has begun. It's going to be long, we're going to see a lot of more horrible things and ugly things. But I think, a new stage has begun.
Where do you see Egypt steaming now? I mean, we all know that the general will win the elections.
Field Marshal.
Yes. So, but really, the Arab world isn't the same anymore. So where do you see Egypt steaming in the coming period?
I have no scenario in mind, and I was never actually enamored with the idea of suggesting scenarios. But definitely, I don't see them succeeding in this policy of eradication of the Muslim Brotherhood is going to create a vendetta. And when, I mean, look, they keep referring to the 90s and how they beat terrorism in the 90s. In the 90s was a whole decade, you know, and they were speaking about the jihadists, who are very tiny, marginal groups compared to the Muslim Brotherhood. So when you're attacking a movement that has within its ranks several 100,000 people at least, and you multiply these by their families, by their friends, by their neighbors, and you create a vendetta with all these people, this is not something that's going to be resolved very easily. And it's going to go on, and they are bargaining that they're going to end it fast so that they can, as they say, get stability back, get foreign investments back, get tourism back. Fat chance. Fat chance. They won't get any of this because this is going to go on for a long time. More important, or no less important, as I was saying, there is resistance. People, Egyptians, have been empowered by the revolution. Egyptians who have been subjects are now seeing themselves, even when they support Sisi. Even when they go, the majority will go to vote for Sisi in a free election. They don't need to rig it. He does have that kind of support. But these people support him because they think he's going to do what they expect him to do. If he doesn't do it, he's going to face the music. Because these people now have been, this whole edifice of fear and of just making do and of just surviving and subverting the system here and there by manipulating, this is really been shattered. And people feel entitled. People feel they have rights. People feel they are citizens. And these people are not easy to govern. And again, as I was saying, if you look at the labor protests, under a reign of terror, when you have continuous labor protests, which are subjected to repression, arrests, and so on, but they go on and on and on and on. Not a single day passes. Numbers are in the thousands. In a few months, we've had, in the past 2 years, we've had more strikes than during the 10 years from 2000 to 2000. Almost double as many strikes as from 2000 to 2010 within 2 years. And as I was saying, again, finally, these young people who made this revolution, they're not going to give up. They're not going to give up. These kids are, they are willing literally to die to defend what they feel. And there are other things. I mean, I was telling you about this. Again, in the midst of this whole hysteria, just a couple of weeks ago, we had something called the DCAF Festival. These young people organized this cultural festival, which went on for 2 weeks, downtown Cairo, on the streets, in galleries, coffee houses, and so on, which included theater, music, dance, poetry recital, and so on. And tens of thousands of young people took part.
I'm afraid we'll have to stop there because we're running very late. What I'll take from you is that the future is unknown, as it has always been, but there are the ingredients, and there's honey still around to call a spade, and hopefully either on Al-Ahram or anywhere else we'll keep reading your words of wisdom. Thank you very much, Hani. Thank you for your time.